arrow that just,
This one, right?
yes, that one.
Okay.
I know, right?
So my presentation was on the effect of American industrialization upon Native Americans from 1860 to 1895. So I wanted to begin with American industrialization and expansion itself, because it was a source of contention. It was pretty much the biggest source of contention between Indians and what happened?
If you press the
Whoa.
the other arrow,
What? Wait,
Twice.
you just moved the mouse with the little
and then
arrow.
press it again. You don't have to go to little mouse. Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
Oh,
no.
oh. Oh, wait, what?
Just press like the middle button. Or just leave it.
Okay. So I was gonna leave, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so it was really big source of contention. So the American industrialization had a lot of effects. Like Caroline said, one of the major effects was the formation of railroads. Railroads and roads were needed to ship goods across the country. And also another result was the increase in gold and other metal mining. Mining became really profitable and attracted a larger amount of people. And also American settlements and factories. Factories grew, attracting a lot of people, urbanization. So these settlements grew, and all three of these, they all caused an American need for land. Railroads, expansion, network, required land. Mining required land grants, land treaties, so to mine, and then settlement, pretty much self-explanatory, need to expand. And this need for land was what had a huge impact. So one of the major impacts was a cultural impact. So hunting was a really deep tradition to Native Americans and passed down through generations. And because of so much land loss, the nomadic movements, the cyclic movements across the Great Plains to hunt was lost. Also because there was so much land encroachment, there were so many settlements near the Indian groups, they couldn't live isolated anymore. They were constantly interrupted, their way of life was interrupted. And I'm also going to talk about this later, but there was also forced assimilation. So Americans tried to have Indians adopt their traditions, their views on life, like gender roles, which I'll talk about later as well. Another effect was the economic effect. As I said earlier, the nomadic movement diminished. So not only was there hunting, but tribes moved around to trade too. So this trade diminished, and without this trade, there was no real flow of wealth between tribes. The movement to hunt buffalo, acquire. Yeah. Can you just?
Is that
Yeah. So it was way much harder to acquire food. Whatever ventures into agriculture they had usually was unprofitable too. So that didn't really help their economy. There's just the depiction of the impact of loss of land. That's a Lakota girl, and you can see how much poverty, how much devastation. So overall, these cultural, economic changes caused contention between Americans and Indians, and this caused diplomatic change. Indians were unhappy with land encroachment, and Americans desired Indian lands greatly, so that led to the dissolution of treaties and new negotiations. In a lot of cases, these negotiations weren't successful, so there were several wars and massacres, which I'll talk about later. And in most cases, again, the Indians lost, and they were forced into reservation. Just a depiction of a war, I guess, painting. And after diplomatic change came Reformation. The Indian Peace Commission, it was established because of a massacre, and I'll talk about that later too. But it decried prior American policy and galvanized reformers. And then the Board of Peace Commissioners was also made, and it did reform Indian policy, but it really Christianized it too. As I said, so it had a lot of Protestant churches and missionaries to become responsible for Indian reform, and a lot of these missionaries, this assimilation concept, tried to instill traditional American gender roles, replace tribal social patterns. For example, women were told to do household work instead of work on farms like they've been doing for generations. There's just this quote which I found interesting from a man named J.L. Brodus. He was reporting to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in 1875, and this just shows how much of a cultural difference there was. He talks about the Native American men as idle, listless, careless, and improvident, and taking no thought about the provision of the future, and many of them not working at all if they were not compelled to do so. So even though Americans viewed them as lazy, it was actually just the culture of these tribes. So there's that. So yeah, the change pattern, American need, cost, cultural impact, Indian economic impact, which led to diplomatic change, warfare, and finally Reformation.
Did you create that yourself?
What? Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Touch your remote.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. Okay, so I just wanted to go a few examples in our history, and one was with the Dakota CO versus Minnesota settlers. It was in the mid-northwestern area, Minnesota, Dakota. And what happened was there was a population increase in Minnesota from 1850 to 1856 because Minnesota became a state, from about 6,000 people to 150K. And because of this, land encroachment occurred, settlement increased, and so hunting for the was it Sioux, right? Sioux.
Yeah,
Hunting for the Sioux became unsustainable, and whatever agriculture, as I said earlier, was unprofitable. So because of desperation, anger, the Sioux uprising occurred, where the Sioux attacked and fought against settlers, and later the American military also intervened. And this is a quote from a Sioux member, and his name is Spotted Tail, and this is what he said. "The war was brought upon us by the children of the Great Father who came to take our land from us without price." And this just shows how Indians were forced to sacrifice their culture, land, and economic stability because of American need, and the Sioux uprising was a repercussion of that. There's just a few members of the Sioux tribe getting ready for war.
That's a photograph.
Yep. So another another example was contentions between American miners in Colorado, in the Colorado area, versus the Cheyenne. So so before there was a treaty called the Treaty of Fort Laramie, and what did was it secured right-of-way access for Americans passing through Colorado to California and Oregon, and so there was a lot of gold in California, so a lot of people moved through. But in 1858, there was actually a gold rush in Colorado itself. This depiction of that, and so a lot of gold. It drew approximately 100,000 white gold seekers, and they believed that the Treaty of Fort Laramie was not enough. They wanted new treaties to be made with local Indian groups to secure land rights in Colorado territory. The Cheyenne bands were, the Cheyenne bands were unhappy with the possibility of a new treaty, and because this would confine them to reservation. But they did reluctantly agree, and so they didn't want war. They went to a place called Fort Leon to negotiate, but a militia led by Chivington, due to fear from the previous Sioux uprising, they'd heard a lot about how savage the Indians were. So they actually attacked these Cheyenne people, and it's just a depiction of that. It was called the Sand Creek Massacre, and it killed the chief. His name was Black Kettle. He, as well as 200 men, women, and children were killed. This had a huge part to play in creating the Indian Peace Commission. As I said, this was a massacre which I was talking about earlier. So yeah, it just was pretty shocking. So it had a lot of impact. My final example is the Comanche versus the U.S. military. So the Comanche tribe had a lot of power in Texas and the southern plains. And so they controlled huge swaths of territory, and they raided vast areas. They were powerful there. But after the Civil War, the U.S. military refocused its attention to the southern plains. And so what happened? There was they tried to come to terms, but there was so much confusion. American officials believed that the Comanche bands had accepted reservation, while Comanche leaders believed that they were guaranteed vast lands for buffalo hunting. So this confusion really caused the Red River War, because in the end the Comanche bands did not want to resettle, because they would lose so much at the culture, economic stability. So the American military launched expeditions into the plains to subdue them, and this culminated in the defeat of the remaining roaming bands as well as the Comanche. So, and these Comanche were sent to reservation Fort Sill, which is in southwestern Oklahoma. So that is the chief of the Comanche. Quanah Parker, is that how you say it? Yeah. And there's where it was, Texas.
So where's the Red River? Where in Texas?
I don't know exactly.
So we're gonna be northwest? So what was the reservation?
Is
you
it
said that-
highlighted?
I don't think so. It shows where the Comanche reservation is,
Okay.
which is right there.
Oh, so it
Yeah.
says,
Yeah.
so that's where they ended up?
Yeah,
Okay. So they moved there, so probably it was south of
yeah,
there,
yeah.
the Red River. So I don't think, we're not down near Mexico, like,
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
up northern Texas. Okay.
Yeah, and Fort Sill is in southwestern Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that makes the Red River must be
Yeah,
up,
so that,
must be one of those up there.
There's just a timeline. I'm not like gonna go through it. It's the Sioux Uprising, Sand Creek Massacre, the Indian Peace Commission, and the Red River War, and then finally a lot of Sioux and whatever remaining Sioux and a lot of other tribes around them surrendered, leading to a little more peace. And those are my sources.
Okay.